Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most authentic voice in true crime. The real reason the Russian convoy stalled outside Kyiv. Cheap Chinese tires. The forces in the north heading south have had to deal with treacherous conditions besides the biting cold, mud and bogs. In short, conditions that not every tire can handle. And remember those aerial photos we saw of parking lots filled with Russian ordnance, parked outside in the snow for several days while the Olympics were sort of winding down. Well, this is the result. Yep. Also not a recipe for rubber meeting the road and holding onto its flex. Before we get to the rest of this episode, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. Like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. So following this episode, I am going to be doing another episode on 5 reasons why Putin's war makes sense. I've seen articles that say, he's acting irrationally and nothing that he does makes sense. Well, I think that is a sign that people don't understand Vladimir Putin. Now, let's get back to the real reason the Russian convoy stalled outside Kyiv. And remember, it's a really long convoy, miles and miles and miles long, but going nowhere. Now, bear in mind, this is not the first time bogs and cold have undone tanks and artillery. The German war machine, it could be argued, didn't run out of gas because of Russian resistance, but rather because it had to withstand the full might of a Russian winter. One additional silly reason, strategically at least, had to do with the Chinese in this instance. Had they attacked earlier, say during the Olympics, and bear in mind the Olympics were held in China this year, the vehicles would have had less exposure to the winter or the mud. I suppose you could also argue that had he done this earlier, temperatures would have been colder, but if that was the case, the substrate would have been firmer, causing less tension and flex on cold frozen tires. All this is speculation, of course. It's also possible someone fueled the entire Russian convoy with sugar water, but military experts are guessing it's the tires. And we've seen this being repeated on credible channels like Forbes. Now, on the week, they talk about, or they refer to Trent Telenko, a retired Pentagon staff specialist and military history blogger, who says that, he also agrees that it's because of Russian tires that are basically imported from China. That is the reason why this is taking place. And apparently he said, when you leave military truck tires in one place for months on end, the sidewalls get brittle in the sun and fail like the tires of the Panzer SR. And he said no one exercised that vehicle for 1 year. Carl Muth, an economist and also government advisor, I think he also self-describes himself as a tire expert, agrees with Telenko, but he adds the following details about the tires. And this is something he put on Twitter, and then I think he removed. But he put it on about 5 days ago on March 3rd. He wrote, quote, "Bit of a tire expert here. Those aren't Soviet-era heavy truck radials. Chinese military tires, and I believe specifically the Yellow Sea YS20. This is a tire I first encountered in Somalia and Sudan. It's a bad Chinese copy of the excellent Michelin XZL military tire design." And so this is quite interesting, is that he actually said that he had personal experience with this particular tire in the conditions of Somalia and Sudan. And both of those areas are hot desert type settings, not the opposite as we have in Ukraine right now. Another reason I think why this tire theory is credible is the award-winning Australian website Defence Connect has basically kind of endorsed this whole idea, and quite a few of the issues that have been brought up here have been repeated elsewhere and vice versa. So there's a quote from Defence Connect. They say, Yes, all the things in the original thread are valid, but these Chinese tires simply don't have the load ratings needed for equipment like what's shown. They are poorly constructed and barely inspected truck radials. The equivalent Michelin product is inspected and x-rayed. He goes on to say the recent Russian invasion of Ukraine has brought significant global scrutiny over the capability of Russian military technology. Now, one of the things I've observed just in following the war as it's been going on is that the Russian military missiles don't seem to be particularly accurate. Now, one could argue that they are accurate and that's why they've been hitting schools and whatnot. But if you look at the one that kind of missed that television tower, you can see that they don't have that sort of precision accuracy that you'd imagine from kind of a world-class army, right? A world-class military power. Going back to Defence Connect, they say, according to Professor Spence Meredith, writing in the Modern War Institute, apparently poor Russian military technology will be brought to global attention in the event of both conventional and irregular combat. And I think what this may show is that the Russian military is kind of undermined by the state of the Russian economy. I think you have the exact same situation in North Korea. So you might have a military with big aspirations and global ambitions, but it's sort of hamstrung by what it can afford, right? And the USA doesn't really have that problem. And so in any event, they talked about it undermining the competitive control the Kremlin exercises over allied rogue nations through military arms sales. And this is a quote from Professor Meredith in Defence Connect. He says, quote, specifically highlighting operational ineptitude and technical malfunctions in Ukraine can impact global arms sales and the Russian brand in the competitive market for private military companies. Both costs would heighten intra-elite rivalries in Moscow as losses mount elsewhere. And so what I do think we are seeing is the Russian military not really proving itself. Certainly not in the north of the country. In the south, they've made some progress, I guess. But I think one thing, if you think about this convoy, if the problem is tires, and some people have said it's a combination of Ukraine resistance, tires, and just kind of mechanical breakdown. It's not just the tires. But if you think about it as the tires being a serious problem, how are you going to solve the problem? Well, you're going to have to bring in more vehicles with spare tires. And think about it, each vehicle's got to carry tires for another vehicle. That adds to the traffic jam. And it's definitely not something that is very easy to solve. And so, in a weird way, that convoy is like a giant sitting duck. Even if the Ukraine forces do nothing, you can imagine that convoy is not going to go anywhere anyway, especially if you've got a significant number of tires that are just going to burst and hamper the progress. So in a weird way, that can just be left alone. And I think that must come as a relief to the people in Kyiv. Just a final point to make is that the far west of Ukraine seems to be pretty much untouched, and so it might be a good idea to reinforce forces in that area from the far west side and to create kind of a front from there in which to push the Russian forces back kind of along that line. Something else that I've heard people talking about, seasoned military veterans, is the Ukrainians shouldn't fight the Russians where the Russians want to fight. They should choose where it suits them, right? Doesn't that make sense? So when the Russians wish to occupy a particular area, let them occupy it, and then when they are sort of have a sense of security, and when a time that suits you, that is when you launch your counteroffensive. The other thing that is being thought about is, shouldn't the parliament and the president be removed from Kyiv and taken to kind of a safe place so that there's some continuity to the Ukrainian government? And, although what he's doing is very heroic, I think what you really want to do is preserve the power structure and just keep it in a different location. And perhaps the place to do that is further west in Ukraine, not to stay in Kyiv. What do you guys think about that? So as I say, I will be following up this particular post with another one on 5 reasons why Putin's war makes sense. So look out for that. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.